Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Fabulous Friday Rambling. We are here, as always, to discuss all things entertainment and pop culture in a, by and large, positive manner because, hey, the internet's full of drama in all directions, and sometimes we all need a little breather from it. With that in mind, we're going to discuss things that have definitely been on a very extended and perhaps perpetual break. Something that gets really to the heart of all things entertainment, and that is lost films. Now, a lost film is pretty much defined by its terms, but to go ahead and keep this official, it is specifically a film that there is evidence for it having been made and existed, such as, old advertising posters, memories of people who had seen the film, but there are no currently existing copies and have not been for an extended period. These days, the idea of a lost film is almost impossible due to the fact that with most people filming on digital style cameras and the internet being available with easy access upload to many websites, some of which exist explicitly to have backup copies of things, it's really hard to film something and then there only be one copy that gets destroyed, unless it's done intentionally. Something that was commercially released, done by a major studio featuring established actors and directors, how does something like that disappear? It's kind of mind-blowing when you look at modern movie industry and modern technology. But modern is the key. See, we have to understand the way that the movie industry worked in its original few generations. And that is that movies were seen as disposable entertainment. Home video release did not exist until the last few decades. And the idea of people wanting to watch a film years after it ran in theater just didn't occur to people. New movies are being made all the time. All this new content, why would you want old content? I mean, personally, I don't understand that logic. I love watching stuff over and over and over again. Especially really good stuff, but that was the attitude of people at the time because movies were not something you lived for. Movies were not something you collected and analyzed and studied on a scholarly level. It was something you went and saw with your date just so you guys had something to do on your date. Hopefully you had a date. Sometimes you saw the movie by yourself, and that's okay too. No judgment here, no shaming here. Now, the other factor in films being lost wasn't just that there was not a big cultural prioritizing of having backup copies in case somebody wanted to see the film 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, but the technology side, specifically the chemistry. You see, in the early film days, especially the silent film era, the actual physical film itself that the movie was printed on, well, chemicals kind of had a few problems. Some of them would tend to degrade over time if they were not stored extremely carefully. Others, because they were based on nitrates, tended to burn. Crackle, 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 fire bad. Fire bad. Yep. Believe it or not, folks, there has been many cases of fires at film studios, specifically in their storage vaults, because they weren't well ventilated and those chemicals did not like consistent high temperatures. There's a lot of films that were lost, even though the copies were stored and saved, because they weren't stored at very good temperatures. Heck, people my age that grew up after VHS became common and affordable technology, I mean, we remember you'd get a VHS tape. I don't have one as a prop. I have a couple in storage myself. And yes, they are inside storage where there is temperature regulation, but I don't have quick access to them. But what I was saying was, those tapes would often have warning signs on them of not to store them in direct sunlight or otherwise warm, unventilated areas, as it would cause damage to the tape. If not literal burning, it would greatly accelerate the degradation of the film. The literal film on which the film, aka the movie, was printed. Did we just discuss why movies are called films? Because they were printed on a substance that would be referred to as a film? Yay! We learned something today! Something extra! Notch that one away, folks. That's for my fans of words and language history. It's a film because it's printed on film. The film is on the film. It's a film. Thanks. So, that's a base brief history of how films get lost. I mean, outside of really crazy low odd stuff like, well, it was a small independent film, we only filmed it, we only screened it at one theater, so I only really had the one or two copies. Kind of pissed off my girlfriend. She set fire to a lot of my stuff at my house, including my film. Stuff like that can happen too. Didn't happen nearly as often as just improper storage causing damage to the film. Fortunately, by the 1950s, the film was being made in new ways that allowed for better long-term shelf life, as well as the rise of the collector industry and various literary and art-minded people coming to view movies as something worth getting scholarly and analytical over. Thus, there was a push to have more copies for random viewings by private individuals, so it became harder for all copies to be accidentally destroyed. So, that's good. Now, some films were, for various reasons, again, most of them being smaller independent films, lost up through the 70s. Since then, there really hasn't been any. Because again, things like home video technology And with that, the rise of mass copy production has made it damn near impossible to lose films. Now, it is important to note that there are films that were once considered lost for decades that have thankfully now been recovered due to private collectors or films being mislabeled when they were put in storage, and it'd just be a matter of, oh hey, I've been wanting to see this film. They load it up and go, oh my god, it's a different film. It happens. And it is good that that happens, because that means we have recovered stuff that will greatly enhance our ability to document, analyze, understand, and enjoy a wider range of the history of film. Now, television does have a similar problem. TV, especially in its early years, was considered even more disposable than theatrical films because it's something we're just beaming into people's homes to amuse them for an evening. However, we'll probably go through a separate episode for Lost TV because it's kind of a thing. So, having discussed the ins and outs of it, the question is, how many of those lost films are really worth worrying about? Well, a lot of them. As we've said before, most of these lost films and their improper storage was because they were done by smaller studios, and as such, featured directors and actors who would go on to be major players in the movie industry. These are their earliest works, and they are incapable of being studied. Which is part of why we know they existed at all, because the people that worked on them later became famous and talked about them. So, what are some examples of notable lost films? Well, let's go through our little listing real quick here. Along with, real quick, some hard math for you. Martin Scorsese and his Film Foundation claim that half of all American films made before 1950 and over 90% of films made before 1929 are lost forever. And a study by the Library of Congress states that 75% of all silent films are now lost. While there is some dispute whether the percentage is quite that high, it is impractical to enumerate any but the more notable and those that can be sourced. So, those figures are certainly capable of being disputed. Now, what are some of these films that people are desperately still looking for copies of? Well, among films commonly mourned among critics and film historians are early films by noted directors and films of unique cultural importance, such as The Mountain Eagle, which was the second film to be directed by Alfred Hitchcock in 1926. The silent melodrama has been described by the British Film Institute as their most wanted lost film, because of course Alfred Hitchcock is one of the greatest directors of all time. Why would you not want to find a new Hitchcock film? And of course, as we said, the British Film Institute, which is a charitable organization that promotes and preserves filmmaking and television in the United Kingdom, and gets most of their funding through lottery funds. It is sponsored by the Department of Digital, Cultural, Media, and Sport. If you find our discussion about lost films and how important it is to preserve films and who is doing this on a highly professional level, please look up more information about the British Film Institute. They are one of the tops of this field. We also have London After Midnight, directed by Todd Browning in 1927. which also stars scary movie legend Lon Chaney, among many others. London After Midnight was a silent era vampire film that is seen by some as the holy grail of lost films, specifically among your horror film collectors. We also have Hollywood, which is a silent comedy film that featured over 30 cameo appearances from major stars of the day, including Fatty Arbuckle, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Astor, and many others. However, currently no footage exists. Films with all African-American casts produced by Ralph Cooper, who, for those of you who don't know, is an American actor, screenwriter, dancer, and choreographer, and is best known as the original master of ceremonies and founder of Amateur Night at the famous Apollo Theater in Harlem, New York City. These films are also considered lost, as nobody has found footage of them in quite a long time. Many other films that are tended to be lost are films that were considered super disposable, such as educational films shown in schools. You know, those classic, hey, here's what to do if a nuclear bomb drops on the school. Get under your wooden desk. Probably not actually going to save your life. Or every teenager's favorite, the sex ed films. Or, come on, various health-relateds like how to do the Heimlich maneuver, what to do if your friend gets shocked by electricity, and just plain public service announcements. Many of those tended to be filmed, distributed, sent back when the schools were finished airing them because new ones with updated information were made, and then destroyed because why would we pay to store film we don't need anymore? Most people that watch it didn't even want to watch it. I'm pretty sure they slept through it. Those usually are not considered highly sought after, but there are collectors for just about everything, so somebody somewhere is desperately seeking some 1950 safety film. And more power to them. Among many other lost films are Andy Warhol's Jack Smith filming Normal Love, which was a home movie that may have been Warhol's first attempt at making a film, was seized by the New York City police in March 1964 and has since disappeared. We have Batman Fights Dracula, a Filipino parody made in 1967 without the permission of DC Comics, who of course owns the character of Batman. And Las Noches del Hombre Lobo, which is the second in a series of films featuring the character of Count Valdemar Daninsky. It was never publicly screened or seen by anyone, and is suspected by some to be a hoax. We also have Flight from Folly, which was the screen debut of stage star Patricia Kirkwood, and is on the BFI 75 Most Wanted list of lost films. Now, there are many, many others, either just a handful we're going to look at. Oh, also, King Kong appears in Edo, which was likely lost during World War II, as it was a 1938 Japanese silent period piece set during the Edo period. And of course, as it would imply, involving King Kong. So real quick, we're going to go through a list of some other films that have been, in this case, partially recovered. As in, we have literally like a fraction of the film, or we have the film but there's no audio, because the earliest films, the audio track was actually separate from the video film reel. So when they were showed in theaters, you had to have your audio and your video. You had to make sure you started them both at the exact right time. Otherwise, your audio would not be in sync with your video. And you would have characters who were talking, and then suddenly they quit talking. Could really throw somebody off and pull them out of the moment of enjoying the film. Or the audio would just plain kick out like that. Again, technology improved, especially in the digital age. Audio and sound is all together. These kind of problems shouldn't happen. Now, again, we're not going to go through the entire list because we don't want to be here all night. I certainly know people don't necessarily like looking at me all night. But this will give you an idea of some things that are considered culturally important, and as such, there is pursuit by a lot of people, such as the aforementioned BFI, to recover them. We have, from 1894, Corbett and Courtney Before the Kinetograph, which was an exhibition fight filmed in the Edison Black Maria studio in 1894. Originally, 6 one-minute rounds were filmed and shown on individual kinetoscopes, which was one of the earliest devices made to exhibit motion pictures. Only one round of this survives. Le Cocher de la Marie, which is one of the first erotic films made. Although back then, because people were really weird about saying things like erotic or sexual, they used the term stag party. Only 2 minutes of this film have survived. We have a 1903 film adaptation of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, which originally ran about 12 minutes, and the BFI has managed to restore a 9-minute and 35-second long cut, a 1905 Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which was the first dramatic Sherlock Holmes adaptation on film, and the second overall Holmes film, the first one being the 32nd film, Sherlock Holmes Baffled. All that exists are short strips of scenes deposited for copyright purposes in the Library of Congress. We have a 1910 version of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which is missing closing credits, leaving the cast and crew as a mystery. Let's see, what are some other interesting ones here? We have The Battle of the Sexes by D.W. Griffith. This was Griffith's second feature, and his first release for Reliance Majestic. Only a 2-minute fragment survives. We have Kiss of Death from 1916, of which we have 30 minutes of the film. We have a 1917 Cleopatra, of which only 40 seconds exist at George Eastman House, Not literally the house of a dude named George Eastman. It is the George Eastman Museum, and is the world's oldest museum dedicated to photography and one of the world's oldest film archives, named after one of the men who founded the Eastman Kodak Company. Let's see, what are some, let's go down here to a few different decades. Let's see, what's a good one to grab at random? From 1924, The Dramatic Life of Abraham Lincoln. We have incomplete prints of the film, including some color-tinted and color-toned footage, exist in various film archives. Let's pick another random little decade here. Let's jump forward again. We have a film adaptation from 1951 of the literary classic The Red Badge of Courage. Unfortunately, after a struggle between the studio and the director John Huston, film was cut from the 2-hour version, which back then was considered quite long for a movie, to a 69-minute version released for theaters. Due to allegedly universally disastrous previews, studio claims that the cut film footage was destroyed, most likely in the 1965 MGM Vault fire. And which means that, as I said, we do have the commercially released theatrical cut. However, the full 2-hour length director's cut is what is lost still. Godzilla Raids Again, which, while the movie itself is intact, the Japanese trailer for the second Godzilla film was long presumed lost. However, the trailer for Rodan began with scenes from the first Godzilla movie and Godzilla Raids Again, and the studio has edited the Rodan trailer to make a partially recovered version of the Godzilla Raids Again trailer. From 1963, it's a mad, 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 mad world, which, like the previous mentioned Red Badge of Courage, was premiered at 192 minutes, was later edited to 162 minutes for general release. Now, again, we're going to do a little bit of math here, folks. 162 minutes is 2 hours and 42 minutes, which means the original at 192 minutes was 3 hours and 12 minutes. That is a long film in any decade. Those missing 30 minutes are still missing. Sergio Leone's classic The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, featuring Clint Eastwood, is missing footage that was completed and later edited out. Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, in which Kubrick cut 19 minutes after the original premiere. Only 17 minutes of this cut footage has been recovered, so there is still a question of the missing 2 minutes. And let me tell you something. If you've never seen a Stanley Kubrick film, those 2 minutes are important. Stanley Kubrick was a highly artistic director. I mean, just every single frame of film was very meticulously done. These days, he'd probably be accused of being a little OCD, a little hard to work with. But artistically, he is one of the all-time great directors. So, yeah, missing 19 minutes for a few decades was a huge deal. The fact there's still 2 minutes floating out there is still big to Kubrick fans, because 2 minutes can have a lot of artistic merit. Wes Craven's early film, The Last House on the Left. Due to the highly graphic nature of the film, especially for the 70s, many cuts were made from the film by the individual theaters for the sake of what their audience could put up with. And as such, there is currently no known copy of the original film as Wes Craven did it. The infamous 1979 Caligula, featuring Malcolm McDowell, most of the third act and many small scenes in the first two-thirds are missing. So, we're going to wrap this up real quick with a look at some rediscovered films. Hold on. Let's see. We have 1979's Leonard Cohen, Bird on a Wire. Vanished after being heavily edited at Cohen's insistence. Discovered in 2009. 1975's The Intruder, featuring Mickey Rooney, Ted Cassidy, and Yvonne DiCarlo, which was shelved by the distribution company and the original negatives destroyed. It was considered lost until a print was discovered in storage in 2012. The Young Marrieds, by Ed Wood, was believed lost for years until rediscovered in Canada in 2004. Necromania, also by Ed Wood. Originally, an edited version surfaced at a yard sale in 1992. However, a complete unedited print showed up in 2001. Big and Little Wong Tin Bar from 1962, which was Jackie Chan's film debut, was thought to have been lost until the full movie was uploaded to YouTube on February 3rd, 2016. Richard Burton's Hamlet, which by contractual agreement, all prints of the films were to have been destroyed after its theatrical run. However, a single print was discovered in Burton's garage following his death. Now, there's many others besides this. However, this does touch the surface and point out how many decades films were lost. So remember, check your storage, especially if you got some older relatives that were hardcore collectors of things. You never know. There could be a film reel up there that you think is just some old home movie nonsense, but if you dust it off, you find somebody that's got a machine that'll run it, it could be a part of Hollywood history that nobody else has. Check your attics. Check your storage sheds. And remember to come back in 7. Because I do enjoy doing this for you. And I certainly hope you enjoy hearing me do this. We'll be back in 7 for another rambling. Until then, peace out. We will be here to have some fun.